Hi, today we are going to change the discs and the pads on a Vauxhall Astra twin top. Or to be more precise, I'm going to actually change the front pads and discs, and I've already done the rear ones. I didn't have the camera with me, so I'm going to talk you through what you need to do on the rear pads, but the front pads are the ones that are a bit more difficult. So please stay with me and watch this video. So once you've raised the car and take off the plastic caps, as I'm using here, I'm using a valve stem tool just to pull them off. You could always use long nose pliers, so remove your caps if you still have them. There we go. So on this car I've got a locking wheel nut, so need to remove the locking wheel nut and remove the bolts. So I'll just speed through this to make it better for you to watch. So once the wheel's removed, it gives you access to the brakes. On this particular car, the brake discs were particularly bad and corroded to the car. So first things first is remove the locking bolt for the disc on the car. And here I actually had a problem, so later on in this video I'll show you how I overcome the problem. But while I put the hex tool, it actually rounded off in the bolt, so I need to remove that later, and I'll show you a bit later. On the rear discs, I have a feeling it was a star point or crosshead, so just remove the spring of the front brakes. You don't find this on the rear brakes, but to me this is one of the hardest bits of actually doing the car, is when you have to put this spring back on, which I'll show you later on how I do it in this video. So just removing the spring and keep that to one side for putting back on later. Right, now we've removed the spring, just turning the wheel and getting to the bolts that hold on the caliper. So there's some plastic caps, and these are dust caps that protect the hex key or an Allen key that's on the wheels themselves. So here I'm just finding them, and there's the other one just there. So remove the plastic cover. And obviously keep those for later, so using a 7mm Allen key, or also known as a hex socket, then you loosen and undo both of the bolts, top and bottom, until I'll just speed through the video here, so no point you watching me and do a bolt for a couple of minutes. So I'll just speed through that, and just so they're just coming out of the rubber there, that gives you the clearance, and you can leave them in there so you don't lose them and for putting them back at a later. So I've done the bottom one there, so just pulling out the top one, and now both of those bolts are removed. The caliper should slide off the discs. So on the rear brakes, instead of the Allen key, you have these hex bolts here, just showing you. You can see the new bolts that I put on. Those don't have any plastic covers over the top, they're just fitted directly to the brake carrier. So now with those bolts, or those hex bolts removed earlier, just ease the old brake pads with the caliper off the discs. These discs are particularly worn and corroded, so I'm having a bit of trouble, so I'll just speed it through, so you don't have to watch me just doing all this at real time. So just loosening that away from the disc, just pulling it back, and there we go, there it's removed. So there we go. So on the front brakes on this car, the disc pad on the inside is actually held in with a spring to the caliper, and the outside one is loose. So Obviously don't allow the caliper to dangle on the hose. So you can see there how bad these discs were. You can see the ridges, how they've made ridges in the disc pad. So this would be affecting the braking performance of the car. So using that hook there, I'll be hooking the caliper up later. So just push away the inside pad. And you can see the inside one was just as bad as the outside pad on this vehicle. While I'm working on the disc, I'll just use a normal hook and just hook it out of the way. So hook it around the caliper and use it around a spring or the bottom of the shock absorber, so it's not dangling on the hose. Now we remove the caliper, time to remove the disc carrier or the caliper carrier. So these are normally on quite hard, so what I've got here is a bit of pipe on my ratchet. Just extends the length of the handle, just to give me a bit more leverage. It makes the life a lot easier, and it's a top tip if you're struggling to undo the bolts. Like I say, this car, I don't know where it was kept before, but there's a lot of corrosion on all the metal on this car, so it looks like it might have been kept near the seaside. So just loosen those bolts top and bottom, and you can remove the caliper carrier. Here, getting back to that bolt there where I told you I had a problem with, where it had been rounded off. So I'm just using an angle grinder to cut a screwdriver slot. So there's the slot cut into the disc, and now using an impact screwdriver. So with hammer on the impact driver, just hammer that and it will loose it. So unfortunately the battery went out on the video, so but that's all I did, and then I screwed it out. So as you can see, this disc is also corroded heavily onto the hub. So just hammer the disc back and forth, and just to loosen all the corrosion around where it's joined on. So I'll just speed through this again, so you don't watch me just hammering at this for 10 minutes. So as you can see, just hitting from behind now, and there's the disc loose. So as you can see on this disc how corroded it was, sort of on the inside and the outside. I think approximately 9 months remaining on the MOT when I purchased it. So using a wire brush, just cleaning the hub ready for when the discs go back on. And I'd also say make sure you wear the right PPE, as you don't know what's going to happen with the brake dust going into your lungs. So I'm just doing the same on the brake caliper. Sorry, on the caliper hanger.
Just get rid of all the loose corrosion.
So they'll slide easy and give you good braking pressure. So on these discs, they're actually painted discs, but if you have machine discs, then you have to remove the machine oil that they use, so white spirits or brake cleaner, and you spray the discs to remove any oil that would be on the discs, obviously before you put the pads in place. So as these are painted discs, you don't need to do that, but I will actually wipe over where my oily thumbs have touched on the disc, just to remove any dirt and oil that I'm putting back on now. So putting the locking screw back in place that's removed earlier. So just making sure that screw is nice and tight. Like I said, the back disc I think was a star point, and obviously this would probably be if you took them off and you had a hex like this, you'd have just put them back on with the hex bolt you took off the old disc. So putting the carrier in place with the 2 bolts that you saw me remove earlier, obviously one top and bottom. Just using an air wrench just to speed up the process. Obviously if you just got a socket set, just use your sockets. make sure this is nice and tight. So on the rear brakes, both the pads just slide in, so one on both sides, just slide in like that. But on the front brakes you have the spring that goes inside the caliper. But with both the front brakes and the rear brakes, before you do that you need to push back the caliper. Now this is just a pushing caliper on the front. I think it was a rotating one on the back, so I'll put a link in the description for one of these wind back tools. So they just fit on, and then you screw the nut up there just to hold it in place, and then once that's held in place, just twist the arm at the top and you'll push this back. Now I'm going to do this in real time, so as you twist in the lever, sorry, you're just pushing the piston back into the caliper. So these are just the push-in ones. On the rear brakes, I think they're a wind back, so instead of it just pushing in, as you twist this lever, it actually rotates the piston. Some cars will have a left or right hand thread that you need to wind them back. Front ones are usually just on a piston that just pushes out, but as the rears are often used with handbrakes, that's why they tend to be a wind in and wind out brake on your rears. So it really is that easy, just to push the piston back in, and as you're doing that you notice that all the rubber hasn't been deformed and still in good condition. So pushing the inner brake pad into the caliper, so it's held, and then both the caliper and the inner brake pad just slide onto the disc over the outside brake disc as well. So now getting the Allen bolts that we didn't remove, we just loosened out, so they're still in place on the caliper. So just using those Allen bolts with a 7mm Allen, just screwing that back into place. So make sure they're nice and tight. There's the top one and the bottom. So there's the top one done, and don't forget to fit the dust caps. There's a dust cap on the bottom and the dust cap fitted to the top. So on the rear brakes that would be finished, but on the front brakes we've got to reattach this spring. So this is the bane of my life doing these brakes. Not all brakes have these springs, but I can spend longer sometimes reattaching this spring than I do actually doing the whole job. Sometimes it's best to put the top one in first, sometimes it's best to put the bottom in. It doesn't seem to matter which way round you do it, it's just a case of do which you find easier. So I used to spend years fiddling with all sorts of trying to pull them and screwdrivers and catching my hands, but I came across another way of doing them recently, so I'm going to show that in a minute. So it's always pulling that spring into the last distance to get in that hole. That's always a bit you struggle with. So what I found recently is if I use a pair of maul grips, so I can clip on this bottom of the spring, so then that stretches it, and sometimes you can just push it in now with your thumb. Struggling a bit to get these in place, so I decided, looking at the spring, that it might be easier to swap it to the clamping at the top of the spring with the spring in the bottom hole first. So I've done that, and if you look, it's a lot closer to being lined up now. So using a bit of a brake puller, just pull that, trying to get it into the hole, and then trying to pull it down and push it into the hole with my thumb. So try the brake puller, now I'm just trying it with a screwdriver. Eventually I went back to the brake puller, there we go, there it's in now. So like I say, it's the bane of my life, so doing those springs. Lots of cars don't have them and it's a lot easier to do, but you know, that's what's fitted to this car. So before you so I'm putting on the wheel now, but before you think the job is done, once you put on the wheel and you've tightened up all the bolts, you want to make sure that the brakes are pumped on the pedal. So you want to pump the pedal to push the piston out so that your brakes are tight on the disc. So you need to close all that gap. So it's an easy job to do yourself. So if this has been helpful, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thank you, cheers.